Welcome to the Rotary Club Milwaukee. I am Club President Darren Miller, President and owner of JM Construction. This is our 22nd virtual meeting in our club's 108-year history, and I will continue by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now, Sister Edna Lonergan of St. Anne Center for Intergenerational Care will give our invocation.
As we gather here today, may we appreciate all those who sow the seeds of care and protection for the vulnerable. May all here and everywhere who have been called to be police officers be empowered to see problems and find solutions to the unrest and bring peace, and to call on their wisdom, experience, and training as they face difficult situations day after day. As they protect and serve all the men, women, and children in our Milwaukee community, may they be secure in the knowledge that what they do does make a difference.
Thank you, Sister Edna. Before we begin our program, I'll run through a bit of club business and announcements. I hope all of you saw in today's email about our return to in-person meetings next Tuesday, September 1st. This was a tough decision made by our board, but it's important that we listen to our members. Over the 3 surveys of our members conducted over the summer, a solid 1/3 of respondents are telling us that they want to come back to Memorial Hall. So I will be here next week to welcome those who want to return. Unfortunately, it won't be business as usual. Masks and social distancing will be enforced. We will have boxed lunches and 3 people per table. RSVPs are required for each meeting by the previous Friday at 8 a.m. Of course, for those who prefer the comfort of home or office, the virtual viewing option will continue via YouTube. Unfortunately, we can't continue Zoom once we come back to the hall, but YouTube is an excellent option. I'd just like to say that I've spoken to a number of you about this, and I hope that you're all feeling heard. We have a fantastic board, and they're all doing a very diligent and persistent job of providing the best programming possible. We are also looking forward to this year's RCM Scholarship Golf Classic on Monday, August 31st. Our golf registration is currently full, but for those who are comfortable, we welcome Rotarians and your guests to join us for a socially distanced outdoor cocktail reception following the golf at 5 p.m. The cost for this is $45 to attend and will feature heavy appetizers and an auction. See the link in this morning's email to attend. The silent auction for the golf outing is now open and features some really fun items: great wine, a feast for a Maharaja, and a tie signed by Arnold Palmer. That's a truly unique gift and find. You can check out these items and more online. Instructions for accessing the portal are included in this morning's email. And of course, all proceeds support our RCM scholarship program. Also, the Salvation Army is looking for volunteers to pack 1,000 boxes of food to be distributed to families. The packing will take place this week, August 25 through the 27th at the Salvation Army's Distribution Center, located at 5880 North 60th Street in Milwaukee. See the link in this morning's email to register to help for that. The RCM Community Trust is a proud sponsor of the inaugural Black Theater Festival. We have a few complimentary passes available on a first come, first served basis. Check this morning's email as well to touch base with Michelle if you'd like a pass. I'd like to say thank you again to Dr. Bob Gleason for his update on COVID-19 last Thursday. Once again, we learned a lot from your thoughtful remarks. The program is now live on our YouTube channel. This Thursday, join us to hear from the legendary Franklin Gimbel about some of his stories as a criminal defense lawyer in Milwaukee. Frank, as you know, is a past president of our club. If you're joining us today via Zoom, when we get to the Q&A portion of the program, we'll change the format so that you'll be able to view your fellow audience members. Just switch to gallery view at that time and continue to submit your questions in the chat function. And now, Kent Laverne, Chief Deputy District Attorney for Milwaukee County, will introduce our program.
Thank you, President Darren. Good afternoon to all of you. Dale Bormann came on the job 24 years ago as a police officer with the city of Milwaukee. He worked in Milwaukee Police District 5 and District 3, and after about 11 years as a patrol officer, was promoted to detective, where he worked property crimes, robberies, and violent crimes. He then handled financial crime cases for approximately 3 to 4 years. In February of 2019, Dale became the vice president of the Milwaukee Police Association. And in January of this year, Dale became the president of the MPA. Dale, I want to welcome you to the Rotary Club today.
Thank you.
So why don't we get started by just asking a little bit about your background and what made you decide to be a police officer?
I think it started back when I was about 16 years old, when I got pulled over by the police driving pretty fast down the freeway. And my father at the time kind of put me through the ringer, made sure I had to go through court and take a plea and then pay the fine and everything like that. And I think at that point, things changed. I started looking at stuff, through the law enforcement eye, and I wanted to become a police officer. At first, I wanted to go to the FBI, and I kind of screwed around a little bit in college and ended up staying local instead, and joined up with the Milwaukee Police Department upon graduation of college.
What would you say were some of the most rewarding assignments you've had as an officer?
Some of the most rewarding ones, I think, would be, dealing with kids, the citizens of Milwaukee, where you get sent to some of the crimes where the kids are involved in, and, you have to put things together to be able to solve that crime, what happened to a kid and things like that. And, to receive the thanks from the kids at that time was amazing. I think it was probably the best part of my whole career, was dealing with the kids.
Now, after almost 24 years as an officer and detective, you've moved into the ranks of leadership in the police association. And what led you down that path of leadership in the union?
Sure. About 15 years ago, I attended my first union meeting. And at the time we had Brad Nebraska, who was the president. And maybe I'm dating myself a little bit, but just to see the things that the union did for the officers and the detectives and the members of that union. And I started going to more and more meetings, volunteered for a few things. And for the last 10, 11 years, I've been on the union board. Started off as a part-time trustee, where I still work the streets, but I came into the union and attended meetings and attended seminars and did things for the officers. And then February of last year, of 2019, the vice president position opened up, and I ran for the spot, got elected, and I stayed on as the vice president all of 19. And then January 1st, I became president of the Milwaukee Police Association.
And what would you say, you've obviously had a long history working within the association, and what would you say is the importance of and the relevance today of police unions, maybe as opposed to years ago, and especially in light of the fact that, you know, we see other associations and unions have actually diminished in membership over the years. What's unique about the police union in that regard?
Well, I think a police union is very important to the officers. Police union is supposed to protect the officers to a point. And that point, you know, you can't necessarily protect those officers who have done something wrong, that are criminally doing something wrong. So our job is to settle contracts for the officers, which included myself, and also working and taking care of the officers when they get into a tight spot, or they just have normal questions every day regarding contracts or regarding work conditions or things like that. And my job as the president is to do that, to make sure they're taken care of. Now, like I said, you know, I can't protect everybody. We've had a series of officers who have been fired this year, but it's my job to bring them in and talk to them and see what they want to do, if they want to be terminated or if they want to be or if they want to resign. And it's completely up to the officer, but there are cases out there that we really can't protect everybody per se. And there are some things that officers do that they know we can't protect them. So they have to decide for themselves if they're going to step down or take a firing.
So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about recent events here. Obviously, when we scheduled this several weeks ago, we didn't know that today the eyes of the nation would be on Wisconsin with the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha. So I want to ask right now whether you have any comment about that particular situation as it's unfolding.
The only comment I can really make, because there are a lot of pieces to that whole puzzle that the investigators are working on, but I calmly ask everybody to take a step back and let the investigators do their job. I heard, you know, within the next 30 days or so, they might have some information or be able to put some information out to people so they can understand what's going on. But I do ask that people take a step back and let the investigators work on the case, and whatever happens at that point, and then go from there.
Now, there have been recently calls, first by the governor for a special session of the legislature to discuss issues related to policing in Wisconsin. There was also very recently an announcement by Assembly Speaker Voss of the creation of a task force related to racial disparities and all sorts of issues within Wisconsin, measures in Wisconsin, including in public safety. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about these proposals from leadership in Madison and what opportunities for engagement might be available there?
Well, I think it's wise to listen to Speaker Voss. He's setting up a task force to try to solve these issues that are going on out there. I think that Governor Evers called for that special session. I think it's August 31st, I believe. And we'll have to see what happens on that. I think it's important that people need to get together and talk about whatever is going on out there in the world, the issues that are going on. And I think the police need to listen too, quite frankly. It's a two-way street. And I think the officers need to be able to work with citizens that they protect and try to come up with some solutions to make it work. If nobody's going to sit down and talk, I don't think anything is going to get worked out. And I believe we're going down the wrong hole. So I think it's very important that some of those in Madison are coming up with task force or willing to sit down and talk about things. Like I said, without it, I don't think it's going to work. But we definitely need to sit down and talk and listen to each other.
And we know that the shooting of Mr. Blake is the most recent in a series of incidents that have occurred here this summer in America. And I want to ask you, going back a few months, what your reaction was when you watched the video of the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis.
I was disturbed. I still am. It's a situation where the officer didn't need to do what he did. And it hurts all those officers out there trying to do the right thing, and it hurts the citizens of this country. And if he did not, can you imagine if he did not do that and everything worked well, where we would be right now? We probably wouldn't be protesting or anything like that. But I think people need to look at that situation and change and get together and talk about things and try to figure out a way to make it work. Peaceful protesting is working. The non-peaceful one isn't. But I think we need to come to the table and talk and try to figure this thing out before it gets any worse than what it is right now.
Let me ask you, when you talk about the protesting and the demonstrations that have gone on around the country, what are some of the messages that you have taken from it or that you're hearing from the demonstrations that have taken place all summer?
The biggest thing is I think there's frustration out there. I think the citizens are very frustrated with how things are being handled. And I completely get that. But on the other hand, I hear from the officers too that, the non-peaceful protesting isn't always working. People who own those businesses that are being burnt are suffering. With the coronavirus going on, they're already probably short on business, and then to have their business burnt is a double whammy to them. And I think the biggest thing is, the citizens are hurting, and us as law enforcement completely understand that. And there are probably 99% of the officers out there trying to do what's right for the citizens. But it's kind of hard to do those things when, the officers are fighting those who are not peacefully protesting. So I think there's a lot going on with this whole thing. And, those are a couple of things that I've gotten out of everything that's going on so far.
And you've been an officer now for almost a quarter of a century. So what would you say, have you observed change in the relationship between police and community throughout your career? And what have those observations been? Have there been things that in the past have worked that aren't working now? Or what would you say has changed for the better and for the worse?
I will tell you, I've never used a camera. I became a detective right around the time that the cameras came out. I think that is potentially one of the bigger changes out there. before, people would do things that a camera wouldn't pick up or a cell phone wouldn't pick up or anything like that. Now that you have that camera there, it stands for accountability. It shows a lot of things that a lot of people don't expect it to show. But I think it holds all of our officers accountable for their actions. Granted, some of the things the camera has, helped out an officer where somebody has filed, reports against an officer for doing this and that, and the camera has shown that they've done the right thing. But I honestly think a camera is very good for any local or any state or federal law enforcement organization. Back in the day, we were able to, do things differently. And I'm not saying we did things illegally or anything like that, but we were able to do stuff differently back then. And it's our job, our law enforcement's job to change things. And like I said, that camera was the first thing that has changed things. And I'm actually kind of pleased that we have cameras on our Milwaukee Police Department. Every officer has one, and every officer needs to have one for themselves and also for the citizens of Milwaukee.
What you talk about the cameras and the benefits of having the cameras. Are there additional types of training now that relate to the cameras and relate to communication, I would say, between police officers and members of the community as they engage with them, that maybe the increased accountability has fostered, has encouraged?
Sure. Prior to receiving a camera, you had to be trained on it. You had to know every parts of that camera that is used, how to turn it on, how to turn it off. There's SOPs out there talking about cameras and when you can have them on, when you can't. And it goes for tasers too. Most of our officers carry a taser, but they have to go through constant training on the taser unit. They have to be recertified on the taser unit to understand how and when to use that taser. And I think without the continuous training that we're doing, and we do roughly 24 hours of training every year to keep our certification through the state, I think this training is very important for our officers. It gives us the opportunity to learn new things and to continue to learn new things and how to use the taser and the camera, among other things.
I'd like to get your reaction to calls that we've heard a lot of this summer for defunding police departments. What's your view on that?
I got strong views on that. I know there are calls for defunding the police department across the country, and specifically to Milwaukee, I think one of the issues, if you're going to defund the police by 10% or $75 million, you're going to lose officers. That's point blank. At the time, Chief Morales brought it up. He said that by defunding the police by a certain percentage, you're going to lose District 5, you're going to lose District 7, you're going to lose sensitive crimes. That's a lot of officers. Right now, they're talking about the 10%. That equates to roughly 350 to 375 officers that are gone. And without those officers, how are you going to go to the assignments? How are you going to effectively help the citizens of Milwaukee when the officers are just going to be running, assignment to assignment the whole time? So I think defunding isn't the proper word to use for this. And some people may agree with me or disagree, but I think there are other ways to do it. We're down 100 plus officers already. We just had a class hit 25 years last week. We have another one that's going to hit 25 years beginning of December. But we're already down over 100 people between us and the Milwaukee Police Supervisors Unit. So if you take those numbers in and you don't fill those spots, you're still going to lose another couple hundred officers. People aren't staying around anymore, unfortunately. And by yelling and saying, we want to defund the police department, you're just going to lose people. People are going to leave. People are going to go elsewhere, or they're just going to get out of law enforcement altogether. And that's why I think defunding isn't the proper word. I think talking about things is probably the best way to do it, and come up with ideas of how to make it work so that the citizens are not affected or they're not hurt during this process.
You know, I want to ask you in a minute about recruiting in general, but staying on the same line with the defunding issue, a question I have is, I know the police department gets called to a number of situations that a lot of us wouldn't think of with regard to the commission of a crime necessarily. And I'm wondering, do you know what percentage of your calls for service relate to other types of those calls, and what would be some examples of some of those calls?
Well, I'm not quite sure what the percentage would be right now. I would have to do some digging and seeing what they are. But, you know, some of the other calls that, you know, we are sent to are barking dog. Do we really need to go to a barking dog unless it's going on for a while? You know, they're loud music complaints at residents and stuff like that. It's a nuisance to some residents, and I completely get that. But is there another way to handle that situation rather than sending a, you know, 2-person officer squad to that assignment to take care of a noise nuisance? You know, things like that could possibly be handled by somebody else, or kind of go from there and see what happens with it. But I caution people by saying, okay, let's send somebody to those other than an officer, because sometimes those assignments can turn bad and sometimes they can turn deadly. And somebody may not want to have their door knocked on because their dog is barking, and they pull out a gun for something and they shoot at the officer. So I kind of caution some of these lower assigned hitches or assignments, and just ask people to be careful of, you know, of who they're going to send to some of these assignments, because I think this time and age right now where, you know, guns seem to be very easily accessible could possibly hurt the officer, you know, in the long run.
You see some scenarios. I'm thinking of the community response to mental health right now that has evolved over the last 10 years with more teams of law enforcement, along with a practitioner, along with a clinical professional responding to individuals with mental health crises. Do you see some other similar models that could be developed around some of the other types of calls for service that you're constantly responding to, that maybe police officers wouldn't have the natural expertise in, but are responding to it because it could become a public safety issue?
Sure, I can see that, but I think it needs to be a joint effort. I think very similar to, I think it's the CART program, that's the mental health aspect of our department. You know, you have professionals working with law enforcement officers, and I think that's, you know, on some of these lower assigned cases or assignments that could possibly work. But I can see our department, and I would be in favor of it, of trying to figure out some way to make it work where a professional does go out with the officer and try to take care of that situation.
We talk a little bit about recruiting. You mentioned the difficulty with retaining officers right now. So 2 questions: are you seeing more people leaving the job at a faster rate than you've seen before? And then the other question is, how's recruiting going in general to replace officers and bring new ones onto the force? And how are the recruiting efforts in order to make the police department better reflect the community of Milwaukee that it serves?
Sure. We have a recruit class in house. So in other words, they're at the academy right now. 63 officers are there. They're supposed to graduate sometime in October. That's definitely would help the situation with our numbers going down. Officers who are leaving after 25 years, I look at the class, they come in into the association, and a lot of them are people who never wanted to leave after 25. They would stick around a lot longer, and they're not sticking around anymore. A lot of them decided that it's just time to leave. They don't want to handle the unpeaceful protesting that's going on out there. Again, peaceful protesting they have no problem with, but it's the unpeaceful protesting that these officers don't really care for right now. So that they're retiring. Myself, I can retire in about 11 months if I choose to. And from day one, I always thought I would be on the job 30 plus years. It's a good job. But there are people out there that put the 25 in and then move on. So it's a little hard to see officers leaving, but after 25 years, or however long they do, I understand why they're leaving. It's a pretty difficult job. Law enforcement is extremely difficult. And I think, law enforcement officers go through things differently than, other people do. And, there's a lot of stress on their body. And, if they want to leave, granted they have the right to leave after 25, but, most people just don't want to stick around anymore. And you see that, especially in Seattle, where they're losing their members to other departments. Portland's like that. A lot of the larger cities are doing that. They're losing officers. Look at Tulsa. They have to hire 30 officers over the next couple of years I think they have Freighter now, the system. And I don't know how they're going to get the officers. A poll came out that most of their officers are looking elsewhere. So I don't know how they're going to hold up their department and then hire additional people to work the hospital system. So it's kind of hard to see, especially in this position, that officers are leaving when they can.
And then how about recruiting efforts for especially people of color to come on to the department? We're a diverse city, and certainly I think a lot of people would agree that there's value in having a police department that reflects the demographics of our community. How's that going?
Absolutely. Our department, my understanding over the last 5 years or so, that our department is going out and hiring minorities to fill those spots. And I absolutely love that, because you're bringing people from the community into the department and working on the department, and people see that. And, I would hope that helps between the department and the community. But it's, on the other hand, right now, you got a lot of people who are not signing up to be law enforcement anymore. And that part's a shame. It's very disappointing, but everybody's got their reasons for whatever they do. And, I hope it works out for everybody, and I hope it works out for our department too.
You talked a little bit about people coming together and talking more about way to solve problems in Milwaukee and elsewhere. What would you say? How can police community relations be enhanced in Milwaukee? If you controlled everything here, how would you design, a mechanism for developing better community police relationships?
But I would say, I think we need to get the supervisors and also the members of my union here going out to community meetings. They need to talk to people. They need to show that law enforcement is normal. They're normal citizens too, and they care about the citizens of Milwaukee. And I think, I would probably start with that. It worked years ago, going to community meetings and listening to the citizens, explain to the officers what is good, what's bad, have you thought about this or that? And I think that's wise. But I think there are a lot of other things that we can do too. The community is important to us, and I think the officers know that. And unfortunately, it's a struggle by our officers because they don't think they're getting the support from the citizens. But I think they are getting it to a point, but it's just a matter of trying to explain it to the officers that keep your head up and keep pushing out there and, keep talking to people and to bring our community with the citizens of Milwaukee together. And I think that's the only way it's going to work. It's a lot of talking, a lot of understanding each other. And if neither side is willing to do that, I don't know, how it's going to work. But I think the officers need to really get out there and talk to the citizens and to better understand them and understand what's going on in the city.
Well, and you're obviously a leader in the department, so I'm wondering, when you've reflected what you've just said, to your membership and to rank and file, what's the response you're getting from people in this very difficult time? What are you hearing from officers about their desire to engage more like what you're describing?
A lot of the officers don't mind doing it. They have no problem with going out and talking to people. But unfortunately, with our numbers kind of reducing in size, a lot of them are stuck taking assignments all the time. A lot of them are, unfortunately, have to deal with the unfriendly or the protesting that is being done. And I think our officers want to get away from the protesting part and get back in there and talk to people and try to build up those relationships with each other. And so that way, somehow we can move forward. Not just us, but the citizens. But I think the main thing is the citizens need to know and they need to feel that they're being listened to. And hopefully our officers are doing that and getting out there and listening to people on a regular basis.
I'm wondering if there are additional types of training. We talked a little bit about some of the other training your officers do, but I'm thinking about training that could be available related specifically to communicating with members of the community, communicating with young people, for example. A lot of the incidents become very volatile between police and members of the community, often involve younger people and a failure to communicate prior to the incident coming to a head. I'm just wondering if you've taken a look at some of those and what's out there and what you do already with regard to training at MPD and what maybe could be supplemented to improve that level of communication as well.
I haven't necessarily looked at it, but I would tell you that if there's some other type of training that we could do to better ourselves. If it betters ourselves, then it betters the citizens of Milwaukee too. It's a joint effort between us and the citizens of Milwaukee. And I bet you if you go out to any of the officers and ask them, they would welcome it. And I think it's very important that that it's done. There's a lot of things that the officers and the citizens need to do to work together on a lot of issues that are going on out there. And without working together, I don't think anything is going to get done, unfortunately.
You made the statement very early on in your remarks about the fact that in your position, some officers make decisions and take actions that they can't be protected from, that they have to own accountability for, and they either get fired or they get criminally prosecuted. And you've referred to some of that's happened this year. My question is, some would say, of course, that in every organization you're going to have individuals who don't behave in a way that they should. Others would say that this is indicative of a bigger need for cultural change within police departments. And I'm just wondering what your reaction to that is.
I can't really answer the private world because I've never really worked in it. But I've only worked in law enforcement, for the majority of my career. And I think our officers, for the most part, do everything that they're trained, everything that they're supposed to do. But I also think, there are a couple out there that don't. And it comes down to that if the officers are not going to change, they shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be on the job. But I think our officers do a good enough job already, on the streets, taking assignments and doing that stuff. But I think our officers also need to look themselves in the face too, and realize that we're now entering a different type of world. And if they're like I said, if they definitely are not going to conform or change a little bit, then a couple of those officers may have to leave before they get in trouble. And we don't condone, we don't like when our officers do something wrong. Okay. And I've heard that a number of times. We're out there to protect our officers from, being prosecuted or this or that. And I'll be the first to say we don't do that, not as a union body. We end up talking to the officers and explain it to them, how things are going to go. And most than not understand that. And, if those guys are doing something wrong and they get terminated from the job, they get terminated from the job. We're not going to stand in the way of that, with the exception of making sure their due processes are followed. And we have to do that. We have to follow the due process. And however it turns out, it turns out.
Kent, this is Mary. Thank you, Dale. We have a lot of questions in the chat, so if it's okay, I'll swing over to the chat here and start at the top from Chris Hendricks. And this really follows up on what you're really just talking about right now, is that most professional associations have established legal and ethical standards for their members and take action to identify people who violate them. Chris's own professional association publicly removes or censures members in violation. Considering the critical nature of police work, does the police union or professional association do that? Or is that really something that is, you're dependent upon the department to determine when someone needs to be censured?
That would probably be done by the department. Internal Affairs is the division that handles a lot of the complaints that are filed by the members. And if they feel that the officers need to be suspended or even terminated, then, that's when we get involved. And we try our best to, we try our best to navigate throughout that whole process, and then whatever happens after that happens.
Can you give us an example or two of some of the reasons why someone has been fired this year?
I really can't, unfortunately. I would love to, but some of them have court cases out there, or their cases are being heard by the Fire and Police Commission. So I'd like to tell you, but unfortunately I couldn't, because I don't want to screw up whatever they got going on. I'm sorry.
So Dr. John Ridley asks, do you have confidence that police officer training is adequate in regard to de-escalation and implicit bias issues?
I think our police training that we get at the academy is adequate. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely, there always is. And I think that if there's some way to increase our training or teach us different things, I look forward to that. And I think our officers would do the exact same thing too. I think they would look forward to it. But I think there are some people out there, let me rephrase that. I think there is some type of training out there that could be improved.
Okay. Here's a question for Kent from Tom Gale. Kent, murder is the intentional killing of a human being by another human being. You referred to the murder of George Floyd. Are you saying the police officer intended to kill George Floyd? George Floyd certainly died as a result of his interaction with the police, but has it been determined that it's murder?
I believe the charges that the officer's facing indicate that there was intent involved.
My recollection was homicide was in the charges too. From John Ridley again, do you have suggestions as how the MPD budget could be distributed within the department to be more effective? And I think a corollary question there is also that you're talking about the difficulty of recruiting officers. Does that lead to an opportunity to think about redistributing work and bringing different types of professionals in to help with the work of the police department?
So my answer for that would be, I don't think decreasing the budget for the department is wise. A lot of people may disagree with me, but I think that the department should receive extra money to help pay for that part of it. To bringing people in, to making it work, to going out and, working with our officers to go out to the city and the citizens of Milwaukee. But I don't think decreasing a police budget is really going to be able to do that. And I'm sorry to say it that way, but I would prefer to see additional money going towards those programs to see how that works. And I think if we can get additional money for it, for those programs, I think it would work. And I think, the officers would welcome that part of it.
Okay. Jeff Martinka asks if you have statistics on the MPD, the racial composition of the police force compared to the city as a whole, and perhaps to some other peer cities. Do you have any information about that?
I don't have any information on it, and I apologize on that. If somebody has questions or anything like that, if they need me to, get that information for them, I can definitely do that. I just think I don't have that information right now,
Okay,
exactly what it would be.
Can you share from Beth Heller what approaches the MPA is using to address structural racism within the department? That's a tough one. I mean, it's a big one.
It's a big question. It's an important question too. As far as the department and how they're, what they're doing with it, I couldn't tell you what the department's doing. We just switched over chiefs recently. There was a lot of conflict going on our department since the COVID came in. So I'm not really privileged enough to get that information of exactly what the department is doing. Whatever they're doing, I think is, probably important. And I think eventually, probably this fall, when we start in-services up, I think we'll start receiving, some information from the department of how to make this work with our members.
And actually, as I look at that question again, it actually wasn't the department, it's what's the MPA doing?
Oh,
Do you
MPA?
have any? Yeah, I read it incorrectly. I'm sorry. Do you have something you're doing, or again, is it relying on what the department wants to bring to the table?
It relies on what the department does. The MPA really doesn't have too much to say in the in-service part of it or any of that type of stuff. But we rely on the department to tell us how, they're going to change, and then we kind of go from there with that.
Okay, from Matt Madsen, what are some of the ways we can support the officers that are doing a great job day in and day out amidst the current circumstances while still embracing the need for reform?
Sure. For those who are listening, if you do, support an officer or you want to show some support to the officer, the easiest way is to go up and shake their hand and say thanks. I think a lot of officers miss that, in light of everything that's going on, and it's understandable. But I think our officers need somebody to say, I support you, or thank you, or whatever they want to say to them. I think that goes a long way with our officers.
And from Chris Havlick, what is the MPA doing to keep up morale among officers?
It's difficult right now. Obviously, morale is pretty low. I want our MPA members to know our union is there for them. We try to, during the protesting, the MPA has, bought food and things like that, and fed our officers while they're working, the lines, which is good. But I think the biggest thing is to know that we're there, and, we're doing our best, debating things with not only our members, but also with the city and also the state, trying to get our members the best things that they need to do their job every day.
You mentioned in your remarks the prevalence of guns across the city. Does the MPA have a position on gun control, or in particular, like automatic weapons or any type of weapons?
We don't have a position right now on it. I'm not quite sure if we will have a position on it that we're going to, that we would put out to people. Personally, I think, everybody having a gun, as long as your, license is okay, but those who are not or shouldn't have a gun should not have a gun at all. So I'm kind of torn a little bit on this whole thing where, I believe in guns, but as long as they fall in the right hands, those who are licensed and trained to carry. But I think those who are not probably shouldn't have any guns.
Okay, from Barbara Velez, do you think law enforcement should be politically active? And how did the MPA decide to endorse President Trump's reelection? I don't know if you did locally or if she's referring to New York. Especially seeing as his close aides have been indicted and he's being investigated by the New York City District Attorney. It seems incongruous that a law enforcement organization would endorse a candidate with a multitude of personal legal issues.
Sure. Last Tuesday, we endorsed President Trump. His son was out here at the union office and said a few words, and we presented him with a letter saying that we endorse him. It's definitely not something that all of our members have taken in. There are members out there who don't like President Trump for whatever reason they want. And I respect that. But we endorse President Trump because he is supporting the blue law enforcement. He has said it a number of times, including Vice President Pence has said it a number of times that they are backing law enforcement. As a result, that's the reason why we did. I have to look at the actions of people, and at the time, and I still believe this, that I think President Trump is the person that the MPA should endorse. But just because we have 1,500 members, and not every one of them will, support our idea, and I fully understand that, and I get that.
You mentioned a few minutes ago the situation with former Chief Morales and his change of position. Do you have anything more to say about that, or how you feel about the new police chief, or what's going on?
I have not talked to the new police chief. I sent him a letter congratulating him, and rightfully so. It truly is a congratulations to him that he achieved the position that he did. I hope it goes very well for him in that position. And last I heard, they didn't have any applicants yet for the chief's spot. I don't know if he's going to apply or not, but if Chief Brunson does, good luck to him and to whoever else whoever else applies for the position. But Chief Brunson's new to the position, and he kind of got thrown into that position, and it's going to take a little bit for his head probably to stop spinning, because I know it took me up until the coronavirus kicked in, it took me that long to get my head to stop spinning in this position too. So, but I look forward to talking to him. I will support him, to the best of my abilities, depending on, whatever he comes out with, and then kind of go from there.
Although we have another question that came in sort of related to this, why, in your opinion, does the city have so much problem in keeping police chiefs for any amount of time? From Alex Chow.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Whether this is politically correct or not, I think you do have a lot of people who are in leadership positions. So the aldermen, alderwomen, the mayor, the police chief, you have a lot of people that are in higher positions, and it's hard to please everybody. And I think, that could possibly be one of the issues. But it definitely would be nice to be able to keep a chief in, a police chief in his position for an extended period of time. It's one less thing to worry about. And, it would be nice to have that, but I honestly couldn't tell you. That's the only thing I can think of, is that it's just really hard to please everybody.
Do you have an opinion, or does the MPA have an opinion on like a regional police force?
I would say no real opinion right now, because I've never really thought about it up until this point. I would have to dig into that a little bit and see some advantages and disadvantages of that.
And from Dan Federley, I understand that the police officers no longer have to live in the city. Do you have an assessment of the impact of that? I mean, how many people have left the city? Who's left the city? If it's impacted your political influence in the city at all?
Sure. Right now, it's roughly 60-40 split.
But 60 out of the city?
60 in, I believe. Okay. It's 60 in. Maybe I might have it backwards. But we have a lot of members since residency was lifted. We have a lot of members who got on the job who lived outside the city. And even though they're still on the job, they just never moved into the city for family reasons or for whatever reason. So there are a lot of people who came on the job 25 years ago with me that lived in the city the whole time, and I am included. I still live in the city, and I will until I retire. But a lot of those guys and gals have moved out of the city after retiring. So it's kind of one of those things where you do have a lot of members that do live out of the city, but they never really moved in the city. But also keep in mind, those who moved out of the city have been, if they're homeowners, those homes have been replaced by somebody else who bought those houses. So the tax money is still coming in. As far as the political part of it, we're stretched a little bit, because we do have the city of Milwaukee, obviously because of our members, but where our members go and take up residence, we got to watch those too. So it's a difficult job, and my vice president does an excellent job of trying to figure out the political world a lot better than I could. So.
Okay. Well, I think this is a very good time to turn this back to Darren. Kent and Dale, thank you so much for a very thoughtful and informed hour of conversation. And we certainly hope that that things work out well for all of us in the community and the police department. So thank you for your time and your commitment. President Darren.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Kent, for pulling this together for us. In honor of leaders like the two of you who speak to our club members, we will be making a donation to the YWCA of Southeastern Wisconsin, whose mission is eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Without question, 2020 has seen an overwhelming and almost constant flow of negative news. Today, I'm thrilled to be able to bring you an amazing story of hope. Some of you may have already heard, but I am holding a letter from RI President Holder Knack. The World Health Organization has announced recently that all 47 countries of Africa have been certified as polio-free. Just let that sit with you for a moment, right? This would not be possible without Rotary and tireless commitment of Rotarians. So just let it sit with you for the week, and just happy to have some positive news. After adjournment, please stick with us to further the conversation. Tune in Tuesday at noon for our snack program to hear some more stories about Franklin Gimbel. And join us next Tuesday to hear from Damian Buckman, founder and CEO of the Ability Center. And as a reminder, that program will be held in Memorial Hall and streamed live via YouTube. Thank you, and we are adjourned.
Well, it looks like we still have 25 participants here. I don't know if anybody has a question for Dale or for Kent. I think Kent might still be on. I don't see him at the moment.